And I'm going to hand it over to Jessie, who's going to tell you a little bit about Career Center offerings.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Steward. I'm the Associate Director of the EMU, and I work with many of the programs in the EMU. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And just really quickly, I just want to say, if you're a first-year student, now is a good time to connect with the Career Center. And if you are a sophomore or a junior or a senior or a grad student, it is a really good time to check in with the Career Center. So they are still open and operating, and they have tons of resources and connections, such as networking or meeting with employees or employers that you might be interested to work with. They also can talk to you about a chosen industry and kind of help you find a path in that area. They can help you with internships, resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles. I'm reading from a presentation that I can also make available to you. And they can help you with interviews, negotiating job offers, and graduate school applications and personal statements. It is hard to know how to do these things if you haven't done them before. So I would take advantage of the folks who are here on campus, who are also here and ready to help you. So I'm going to put in their email, their phone number, and their website in the chat. And I would recommend everyone, no matter where you're at, pick a project or pick a problem and ask one of the experts to help you. So that's all of me. I'll turn it back to Taylor or to Mandy.
I can take it from here. All right, I'll save Mandy another preamble. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Taylor Volcolm. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the director of the Student Sustainability Center and one of the members of the CoSLA team that organizes these kinds of events. Thank you all for being with us. This is oftentimes the event that folks find the most fun and interesting because we get to talk to people who were in your shoes a year ago or so, at least, former alumni who have successfully made the transition from college to quote unquote real world. They have jobs, they have parlayed their experience into those jobs, they have recorded and made resumes out of the positions that you hold right now, some of you. And this is just a time for us to talk about that. And I think it's also a really good time because as we start moving into, midway through winter quarter, starting to get into spring quarter, that like, oh crap, what do I do? Starts weighing really, really heavy. And I can only imagine that it is all the heavier now that there is this like also pandemic. So this is just an opportunity to hear from folks that it did not go as they planned. I'm going to go out ahead and say that, even though we haven't talked to them yet, because it never goes according to plan. Now, no one planned pandemic, but even in people's career trajectories, we so often look back at how we got there and it looks like a straight line. But from the starting point, it never looks that way. Or maybe one or two people will be able to say, like, I'm doing exactly the thing that I wanted to do. Amy actually might fall into that category, but we'll find out about that in a moment. So without any further introduction from me, I'm going to introduce today's panelists. We have a great selection of panelists. So first with us is Amy Shake. Amy is currently the Strategic Communications and Public Diplomacy Officer for the British Embassy in Washington. She graduated from UO and the Robert D. Clark Honors College with a BA in International Studies, concentrating on diplomacy, international relations, the Middle East, and North Africa, coupled with not one but two minors in political science and Arabic. Prior to her position at the embassy, she worked at a security-focused think tank, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS, and interned at both the mission of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan to the United Nations and the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. She also served as the ASUO student body president 2 years ago. It's 2 full academic years ago. Not this past one, but the one before that. So welcome, Amy. Amy's joining us from the East Coast, so it's dinnerish time, perhaps. Okay. Next, we have Lingesh Kakakanian, a fellow double deck. Lingesh completed her BA and MA in Romance Languages, where she specialized in French and Italian language and literature. Her language studies led her to teach English abroad, in which she came to realize her joy came from working with students interested in the liberal arts. She currently works as an academic advisor for Northeastern University's College of Social Sciences and the Humanities. So couldn't get enough of college, ended right back in it, like all of the professionals on the call as well. Next up is Laura Grigrioff. Laura gets the prize for the shortest bio with the least to prove. Well done, oftentimes a sign of complete security. Laura is a class of 2020 advertising major and Spanish minor. She recently worked in marketing for a high-end shoe company and is currently working as a freelance graphic designer. Next is Brendan Adamchik. Brendan is an associate for policy and programs at the Product Stewardship Institute, a Boston-based environmental nonprofit that works with state and local governments, businesses, and NGOs to design and implement producer responsibility laws to solve waste management issues and create a circular economy. He is a graduate of the University of Oregon with a BS in Environmental Studies and minors in Geography and Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. He is organized for progressive environmental policy at the University of Oregon campus, on the city level in Eugene, Oregon, and across the state of Oregon. In his free time, Brendan strives to balance reading as much as he can with enjoying Oregon's green spaces. And last but certainly not least, Aaron Jang. Aaron graduated from the University of Oregon in 2017. He majored in business administration with a concentration in sports business. Since graduating from UO, Aaron worked for JOOLA, the Joola, the largest table tennis company in North America. He oversaw the development, planning, preparation, and execution of more than 5 major US table tennis events, the US Open, the US Nationals, etc., including those drawing more than 5,000 participants from around the world in 2018, when that kind of a thing was possible. Currently, he's working at Sedona in Washington, D.C. He specializes in relationship building. He's responsible for marketing procurement for the mayor's office, Destination DC, and DC Health Benefit Exchange Authority. In his free time, Aaron likes to play table tennis with his friends, and he is a certified USA table tennis coach. Please join me in giving them all a silent round of applause, and thank you for joining us all. So we're going to get into a series of questions. Hopefully we can kind of have a conversation about it. We can kind of go through each individual panelist. I know that each one of your diverse backgrounds is going to have something different to say. The first question, though, is a question for everyone. So I would like you all to just, regulate yourselves, unmute when you feel it's appropriate. And the question is both kind of simple and not. How did you get to where you are in your career, and did it play out like you expected it to?
So I guess, so my name is Lingesh, as Taylor introduced, and I guess I'll say, like, I kind of really got into my career being a language major. French and Italian is kind of, you don't really know where you're going to go with that, especially if you don't combine it with another major. And in graduating early, I kind of took a detour and worked retail to pay off student loans. And then from doing that, ended up kind of teaching abroad because I lost touch with the language and I was reconsidering coming back, hence leading to the master's and teaching and going in that route and doing the PhD considering the PhD, I should say, kind of made me realize academia was not the right fit. And that led me to realizing that I really just enjoy working with students. And this past year with COVID, I had taken a year from 2019, like January 2019 to December, just applying for jobs in France, and just took a year and tried to see how far I could get. The most I could find was part-time teaching jobs, nothing full-time. And so I ended up coming back, and that kind of just went through a whole slew of university applications and kind of just accidentally landed me in Boston at Northeastern University. So it's kind of a long-winded way, but definitely not what I planned, but definitely brought on some new friendships and an opportunity to learn how to work remotely for a private university, and also reconsidering how to pursue language studies side by side, since the university offers that too.
All right. So the question is, how did I get to where I am in my career, and did it play out like I was expected? Surprisingly, the first job I landed out of graduation really did fall into the area sports business, because I studied business, concentrating in sports business. And the reason is because I always have a passion about sports and believe that sport can bring people together. My favorite sports growing up is basketball and table tennis, so-called ping pong. So after graduating in 2017, I was offered a job in Yola, which is the like Taylor introduced, the biggest table tennis company in North America. And I was able to move to Maryland to be closer to my girlfriend and now wife. And I'm really excited to move to Maryland. And there I was working as a marketing specialist where I was doing event planning, sponsorship, contract execution, hosting events 3 to 4 times a year and travel tirelessly. And now I have been working as an account manager in Sonoma in Washington, DC since 2019. And I just enjoy working with clients, and I'm responsible for marketing procurements for mayor's office and also DC Health Link. And I really wish I have a playbook to follow, but unfortunately, it's just kind of one of those things I just have to play out. And that's it.
More DC concentration than I thought, and more East Coast concentration than I thought. Let's go to the other DC-ite.
Yeah, no, it's great, Aaron. It's great that you're in DC. I'll have to ping you. We're buddies. Yeah, well, thanks for everyone. Thanks, Taylor and Becky, for setting this up, and everyone involved. I'm so happy to be back and see some friendly faces and fellow ducks here. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like very echoing a lot of what the two other folks said, like a lot of my path was not planned. I could not, if you'd asked me in May of 2018 what I was going to do, I probably could not tell you. That was when I graduated. I took a Hail Mary shot to move out to New York off of like what was left of my savings, and just kind of went with, I had friends who were doing some work, and I just decided to kind of hit them up for the UN work. And then that kind of led me down my path of DC, moving to DC to kind of pursue my interest in IR. For me, I mean, that friend aspect, like networking for me, kind of what led me along my way, whether that's a friend who knew somebody who could, potentially get me an informational interview, or that could just allow me to work part-time for them. I, got a lot of part-time jobs moving to DC because it's very expensive out here. So networking for me was like a big factor, what led me, but I didn't really have a plan, which is not the best. I had like pursuits, and what really rooted me was kind of my vision for what I saw could create change, and really just like rooting myself in those values and vision was helpful to kind of steer me in my internal compass to figure out what might be a good opportunity versus maybe not the best opportunity. Yeah, on my end.
Great, thanks, Amy. I'll throw it over to Brendan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again, Taylor and everyone, for setting this up. This is great. I actually, I'll say career hunt started last year at this event, which was really great. And I learned from a lot of great people. And then I went home and I was like, oh boy, I really have not planned for what happens when I graduate in 3 months. So I started applying for some internships, for some fellowships, for some jobs. I was applying to things on political campaigns, working on environmental policy, doing environmental teaching. I'm gonna say a scary number. I applied to 74 different internships or jobs or fellowships between February and June. It's a lot of applications. Probably a lot of them weren't particularly high quality, but I wanted to get to as many things as possible. And I'm glad I did, because I think that even though I only ended up with one internship, I felt good about the one that I got. And that was in June of last year, right after I graduated. And thankfully, that internship was at the same company where I work at now. It was really interesting to be there over the summer. It's been a very weird time to be working on policy and working on anything with environmentalism, with COVID going on, and a lot of sort of shifting priorities in the world, in good ways and bad ways. But I was interning at that company over the summer, and in the fall, they offered me a job. And so I started full-time there. So I'm kind of lucky in that this first position I wound up in was what I wanted to focus on environmental policy. I'm definitely learning lots of other things too about what it's like to work for a nonprofit, which is really exciting. But it definitely, it took a lot of applications and a lot of just being willing to just apply to anything that looked remotely good. And I wound up here. And so I'm kind of lucky that this is the first thing I got so far, but I have no clue where I'm going from here. So my plan is to stick here for now.
Excellent. Any port in the storm, as they say. All right. And last but certainly not least, Laura.
Hi. Yeah, so I, as you said, am a freelance graphic designer right now, and I graduated last year during the pandemic, as we all know, and that was a very freaky time to graduate because it just kind of seemed like nobody was hiring anywhere, and so it was definitely a scary time, but I just kind of like did the old fashioned thing of going on Indeed and looking at jobs online, and I found like a advertising opportunity because I graduated in advertising, and yeah, they just hired me after a little interview, and what helped a lot was having a lot of portfolio work. I don't know how many ad majors are out there or similar fields, but like having a really solid portfolio of just stuff you did in undergrad that, you know, you can apply to a professional setting, I think helped me a lot. But to go into the how my career took an unexpected turn, after about 3 months, I decided to leave that job, just kind of realizing like the integrity of a company is really important to me. And I left that job and now I'm freelancing, which was totally unplanned, but I'm kind of having a blast with it. It's cool to have people with random projects or like random creative gifts they have in mind for people, and I can just kind of work with that, work with a budget and a time schedule and make those things for people. So freelancing is where I'm at right now.
Great, thank you all. So, I mean, for me, what I took away from that and what I'm hearing is a wide variety of things, right? So if you're keeping track at home, there was cast a wide net. This was exactly the thing that I wanted to do right out of grad school or right out of graduation. There was took an internship and see where that went. I worked for the first company that hired me and decided that it didn't align with me, so I struck out on my own. And then I took the job to get me over the line to take care of the bills while I searched for a greater passion, and then found that, right? So I think all of those are just a wide variety of different approaches into this different perspectives and different approaches. So the next question that I'm going to ask is sort of similar to that, which is, I mean, some of you already did, but can you touch a little bit on how COVID played into that in terms of like, right, we have a new group of folks who are graduating, coming into the workforce. What did it feel like? How did it go? How did the pandemic affect your job search or your current position?
I can jump in. I actually was job searching during COVID. I was looking to pivot careers. I was kind of stuck in a job that I wasn't growing in and really didn't appreciate the work environment for many different reasons. So for me, I was actually really heavily job searching. I was even thinking of moving back to Oregon for a bit, just to kind of gain some solid footing. So for me, I can definitely empathize in I think a host of different ways of job searching during this time. And for me, it was difficult, like networking, going back to like, I can't, get coffee with somebody or like try a new workspace to go type an essay versus like being in my home again. So I think there's those like personal factors that really play into it. And it's hard to also kind of feel inspired, like you're constantly just at home, or maybe you're going to the grocery store once a week, twice a week. It's hard to find that inspiration to get back up and keep putting yourself out there. I really resonated, Brendan, what you said of like just applying to a lot of jobs. I applied to 50 plus jobs to get to where I'm at in this current position. So it's just a constant kind of drill, but I found inspiration just like reaching out, doing like virtual kind of meetings with friends, getting some like relaxing time inspiration about maybe kind of what they really like in their job, but also kind of allowing myself to kind of explore my value set that I could bring to a new like job position or skills that I was interested in, just kind of leveraging that I wasn't leveraging in my current job and getting inspired through that again. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I definitely empathize with job searching during COVID. It's really, really tough, but your network is there, and your friend groups or your family, whoever you go to seek comfort and support, is always there for you, especially during this time. So I would say tap into that.
I'll jump in real quickly. Was one thing that was super, I think, helpful during like job searching during COVID was learning how to kind of put my personality into online documents that I'm sending out to jobs, because they're seeing like 50, 100 applicants every day, and it's like, what about my resume looks a little different, or like even a thing I can add, like, here's this side thing I'm passionate about, I'm going to throw it into this cover letter or this email. And I think like that honestly really helped me a lot personally.
Well, I think Amy and Laura both said a lot of things that I relate to. I think one thing that I felt that I sort of felt like this in a bad way, and it turned into a good thing, was with me when I was doing, as I was looking for lots of different jobs, I kind of changed what I was looking for. I said, okay, I'm willing to work less. I was looking first for like really, hard hitting, like in a legislature or like for a campaign, like very much like policy. I kind of moved myself away and was kind of look for some different work, and that's how I found a nonprofit to work at. So I think I changed what I was looking at originally, but I'm really glad that I did, because I think working at a nonprofit and doing kind of slightly different work has been really interesting, especially because I don't think the kind of job that I would do now had normally been a job, it's based in Boston. They would do a lot of work, in person, in meetings in Boston, doing work with, people on the East Coast there. And I don't think I would have had an opportunity to work for an organization like this, just because if I was going to be Oregon based, because they wouldn't want to hire someone in Oregon. But I think, I kind of changed what I was looking for. And I think so did the organization. They sort of cast a wider net. And I know they're really happy now. I'm the only person who works on the West Coast. So I kind of was able to say, this isn't exactly what I was looking for, but, it has some things I can work on. And also they were really excited because now they can have a West Coast person. So I think it was about kind of not lowering my expectations, but changing what I was looking for, and then being willing to take something, and I kind of tried to make the best out of it, and I made the best out of enough that they wanted to give me a full-time job. So I think it worked out well in the end.
All right. Well, going off of your points, I guess I think Laura mentioned it earlier about having to tailor online documents. I definitely felt that. So after graduating, because I had finished in December 2011 and took like a 5-year break and came back from 2016 to 2018 to do my master's. And so after finishing, I really missed France, and I taught abroad 1 year in France and 1 year in Italy. And really loved my experiences. I lived with host families in Italy, and linking into COVID, basically what happened was after graduating, I had processed a bunch of job applications like everyone else I think has mentioned so far, and lucked out. And so I decided to take a chance and move to France for a year and apply for teaching jobs. But with job security and being an immigrant, it brought me back to the US in December of 2019. And so I was applying for jobs and had something lined up in March, but it fell through because of COVID, since it was a travel agency related job. And so because of that, I ended up just, like everyone else, doing applications, and you definitely go up and down. And so being able to have just not give up essentially, and being rerouted to applying to university jobs, because teaching was kind of falling through a little bit with languages, sort of led me to being able to have that opportunity, and being grateful at least that a liberal arts university picked me up, so that you can kind of at least feel related to what you studied or what you partook in.
For the COVID-19 affect my current position. So for a lot of companies in 2020, it's very difficult time for them. For us also, who are relying heavily on tourism and conferences, was a tough time for our company. So since last March, we lost about 60% of our gross sales. But a couple months later, in early May, we pivot fairly quickly to do something related to the PPE items, like we custom the reusable face mask and use a local hand sanitizer firm to give out for testing side. So the company was able to pivot very quickly, and I was very blessed that I didn't lose any clients last year. Instead of losing them, I actually gaining new clients towards the end of the last year, and I was able to constantly working on those PPE items, and I was contributing actually 80% PPE items in my firm, and I was really thankful that COVID-19 didn't kill me, but made me stronger.
I want to touch on a couple of things that people said. One, I think it's really important for all of you who are in this position to recognize that you are by definition exceptional. I think a lot of times what happens with students is that when you perform at a high level and you surround yourself with other people who are also performing at high levels, you come to assume that everyone is performing at those high levels and has certain levels of expectation. That is not true. And it's really important for you all to sort of recognize, right, that like at least I am impressed with all of our panelists, right? But these panelists are you, right? They are no different in terms of what they are capable of or the positions that they've held. I mean, literally the same positions that you all hold now. So I think it's really important to be able to communicate the exact skill set and to demonstrate, to not feel like what you're doing is normal, right? Like you want to be able to communicate that you're exceptional. So I'm wondering for the panelists, how did you communicate the skills or the leadership roles or the positions that you had in, you know, with your stipend position into job application materials or into interviews? Or what were the things or the duties or the roles or the skill sets that you talked about on a consistent basis that seemed to resonate with employers or internship hires or admissions committees, all of those kinds of things?
I think I'd love to jump in first, just because Taylor, when I worked at the Student Sustainability Center, was my, I guess, boss, supervisor, mentor, what have you. But Taylor taught me that bragging about myself is good sometimes. And so I think I just want to echo that's, you know, it is really easy to think that all of the things you're doing, whether it's, you know, just like, you know, writing an email or scheduling meetings or, you know, doing stuff with receipts or whatever you're doing in your position, it feels like Taylor said, it feels like that's just, you know, the routine, but that's actually like not a thing that a lot of people have coming into jobs. And so I think that a thing I learned to talk about was just sort of mentioning what I did in my positions. And I think that a lot of times in the interviews I had, people were kind of impressed that that was a position that someone had at school while also going to school. And I think with that, I also mentioned, I think it kind of shows up differently in different positions, but I think that the independence of these positions is something I really talked about in my position. I kind of described Taylor as a couple different things because I didn't really have a, you know, a boss or a supervisor. A lot of us, you know, we work closely with a staff person, but we kind of get to design what we're doing on our own. And I think I talked about that a lot with the work that I did in relation to the internship I ended up getting, because they were really interested in how I would work with, you know, policy and work with, you know, the diverse different groups of stakeholders. And I would say, well, in my job, I would meet with students from the business school or students from the environmental studies school or students in the journalism school. And I'd try to, you know, find where we all overlap. And to me, that felt very routine because I did it, you know, every day for 3 years. But for them, they were like, wow, that's kind of amazing. We didn't really know that there were people coming out of school who can do that work. So I think, you know, I touch on independence as a big thing, but I also just want to echo that, you know, brag about yourself a little bit because you're all really cool.
Yeah, I'll go off of that real quickly because it just, everything you said makes me think of like, just be confident in the skills you're bringing, because I know right when I graduated, when I was reading all these job descriptions, I was like, no way in a million years would they ever choose to interview the person who just graduated. But that wasn't the case. And kind of what Brendan was saying, it's like you're doing a lot of things a lot of other people and applicants aren't doing, and that gives you like a huge edge in the job market. And another thing, Brendan kind of said this before too, but having concrete examples to like a claim you're making about yourself is so useful. So instead of just like saying, I'm great at time management and I'm a great leader, and then sending that off as a cover letter, instead like say, I am great at time management because I did this and this and this in this role. So like, I always went to that as a graphic designer for the student activities board. I was like, I have great time management because I helped 5 different teams like roll out their promotional materials. So having that like concrete example, I think was really helpful in interviews for me.
I agree with what all has been said. I also, for me, along with like putting down specific examples and things, to be quite honest, in my current positions, I just actually joined in November to the embassy and to the UK government. And I mean, I wrote, it was like 5 essay questions for the application, and like 2 of my essays were on the ASUO and what I did, food security. So shout out to all the people working on food security stuff, doing it. So coalition building, working with stakeholders, how to balance differences in opinions, all of that so applicable. And, you know, exactly what Laura was saying, and just like providing that concrete example, so pivotal. And honestly, all of the work I did to budget management, negotiations, if you've taken maybe a training course that your student, like for ASUO, I'm pretty sure Becky still does a negotiation course. I cannot attest to how many times it's come in handy for so many different parts of my job, my current job and my previous jobs as well. So being very specific about those, I think, was extremely helpful. And then also, which is something that a lot of people don't take into consideration, numbers are very important. I mean, ASUO, I think, has a very kind of glowing number of like, you know, a certain amount, $1 million of money that you're overseeing a year. And I think being kind of the sole manager of that budget goes, and, you know, you're representing 24,000 students. Be very specific. If you oversee a budget, how much is the budget? How many events did you do a year? Be very specific with numbers. Numbers show a lot on your resume. I would also say, you know, Laura mentioned job descriptions, especially women, you know, or female identifying folks, when they read job descriptions, if they don't meet about 75 or 80% of it, they'll just kind of like toss it away. When, trust me, men out here, especially on the East Coast, will apply to anything with like 40% or less. So I would say, you know, as well, if you hit a certain mark, if you see yourself like that's a cool position I want, just apply. I mean, the worst case that can happen is you don't get it. So that's another thing, I just kind of general career advice, but those are a few things I took for my job and I've thrown it into my current position.
I guess to jump on after Amy speaking, I guess I would probably say similar things. So I was in the ASUO, but my main stipend position at University of Oregon, seems so long ago, was working at the Cultural Forum under Mandy. So that's actually why I'm even here today, because she reached out. And so that played a big part, just because my biggest thing is cultural competency is a really huge thing, and being able to establish connections. I mean, I moved to Italy living with 3 host families and didn't even speak Italian. And by the end of it, I had bonded over being able to say toilet paper in Italian. So little anecdotes make a really big difference. And being able to, my biggest advice is making personal connection and not being afraid to jump out of your comfort zone. Because if I hadn't had those experiences, I was in Paris during the terrorist attacks. And so just being able to have those types of teaching experiences and being able, the immersive cultural background that I went through, that played a huge role to even being able to get the opportunities I did. And to be able to help work with a lot of world languages at the U of O, and also like where I am currently. So I definitely, that's two of my biggest things. So just making sure that you make personal connections and connecting on that level, and being able to take risks, obviously calculated, but you know, even if it's a little bit scary, not being afraid to, the worst you can do is you can quit part way. So you might as well try.
So just going back, how did I get my first and the current job? Just kind of looking back, one of the most important thing I did was to build relationship with the people in my community. So when I was at the University of Oregon, I run the table tennis club. I was a president, and that opportunity allowed me to network with the local table tennis community in Eugene and Springfield. I met so many other awesome people who shared the love for table tennis. And before I graduated, the Eugene Table Tennis Club president, they introduced me to his contact, who was a former table tennis champion from Sweden who currently live in San Diego. And he passed my contact to his contact in Maryland. And that's kind of a few layers of referral that making the personal connection to get my first job landed. And fast forward 2 years later, when I work with the current founder of the company, Sonoda in DC, he is also a USA Hall of Fame table tennis player. And I was able to work with him, had that relationship and foster the relationship throughout the year. And that got me landed on the second job. So just kind of looking back, that very important thing was kind of building that connection and keeping that connection and relationship with people. Just be genuine and be reasonable, respectful, and thoughtful when you make friends.
Yeah, that's all fantastic advice. And it reminds me one of the best pieces of advice that someone ever gave me about the job market was that when you are putting a job out there, you're really looking for a colleague more than you're looking for someone to fill a hole, right? There may be lots and lots of people who can do the job, but as sort of Amy was talking about, there are a lot of people who only meet some of the requirements who are way better people, and you're going to go with those people. And I can assure you all that in the positions that you have, you are those better people, right? So even if you're not necessarily meeting all of the job qualifications, or you don't have the exact experience, At the end of the day, people are looking to hire colleagues more than they're looking to hire cogs. And that's really important to think about it and to remember. So we've got about 12 minutes left. And I think what I'll do, rather than ask the remaining of questions that I have written down, is just open it up for you all to ask questions of the panelists. We can use the hand raise feature, or we can just kind of unmute and start talking. I'm fine with either. And then if there aren't any questions, I've got a couple of others that we can fill out the time with.
Yeah, just going off that last point about like meeting requirements. I know Amy mentioned this, like kind of what's that threshold? Because I think that like, I mean, I'm not graduating that soon, but like when looking for internships and stuff like that, my main like head block is like seeing a whole list of things and I'm making like, you know, a third of them I'm meeting. So like where do you like put yourself in that threshold, or is it different for like internships versus jobs? Like where should you kind of be like, this is something I should apply to, or I, you know, should get some more experience?
Okay, I will say, firstly, there's no harm in applying to something. I mean, maybe it's going to take some of your time, your mental capacity. If it's not too much, though, I would say apply to kind of assess like what, you know, which, you know, requirements you meet and things, you know, thinking a way to like terminology and way in which like employers or certain organizations use, like, you know, what they could use this very fancy language for like, what is budgeting or like, what is budget management? So just kind of like take some time to really read through, and then maybe you can, I usually like to kind of stalk the person that had the job prior to me or has the job, you know, if they do have that position, and see what like they are working on. Maybe they can elaborate on their LinkedIn or something. So just do some like searching about like what are some series that are similar that could apply to this. I would also say, and this is just coming from an East Coast perspective, you're interested in the field of IR, security, policy making in the DC area. I will say a lot of people from the West Coast do not apply for many reasons. Obviously, financial is a huge one for me. That's why I'd never held an internship on the East Coast prior in my undergraduate career. But now that things are open up in a virtual setting, there's a lot more internships open with East Coast companies. Brendan shaking his head, nodding his head. You definitely apply. I mean, the diversity that comes with the experience of being on the West Coast, and I think especially from a state university, is so vital. It's so different than so many people you meet out here. And it just adds this kind of, exactly what Taylor was saying, adds this like a great addition to the organization that you're going to work for, the government you're going to work for, because of your lived experiences. So I would say, you know, just don't discount your experiences as well. You know, of all this, I think, you know, if you think you meet something, you know, might as well apply. What's the harm in doing that? And, you know, concentrate on I'll stop after this. Concentrate on the things that you are meeting in that job requirement. You know, don't say on your cover letter, oh, I don't do this, like I haven't done that point. You know, just highlight the things that you have done, pick a few examples, just concentrate on 2 and just go off of that. That's going to show more than, you know, you saying, oh, it's self-doubting yourself in your application. Definitely hype yourself up. So.
Just quickly add something on Amy's, since I'm in the DC Docs chapter for the alumni. So I know some events that are coming up. So if you guys are applying internship, the DC Docs are actually giving out the scholarship for intern. So now you don't have to physically be here. You can remotely doing things, you know, applying it. And the application is not out yet. So if you reach out to me, and I can, you know, provide you the link and also the information to apply for the scholarship. And that's something I'd love to have you guys to try.
There you go. And that's literally how it happens. That may sound like a general invitation, but that is the door that just opened for all of you. That is how it happens. Anyone else want to respond to that? Otherwise, we'll go to Allie, who has her hand raised.
Yeah, first I want to say thank you all for being here. This has been really awesome and just really cool. My question is, as someone who has a couple of interviews coming up for some internships this summer, what would you say is the best way to prepare for that? Like sort of not take away the anxiety, but just like get out of your own head and just prepare to make sure that you're like fully focused for an interview.
So personally, I would say like for internships, just because I can speak from my experience applying abroad, I would say the best thing is, you know, familiarizing yourself with the job description, obviously for starters, and being able to look up like what the company stands for, kind of what their values are, and being able to highlight at least, I would say like 2 to 3 of those kind of examples, either with the values of the company, the place that you're working for, if it's not a company, or if it happens to be personal experiences. I feel like the personal connection does make a big difference, and it's been kind of a sway for every job I've ever gotten. So being able to identify with, also if you tend to be able to scope out who is going to be interviewing you, or the place that you're going to be working with, the people that you'll be working with, and knowing a little bit about their backgrounds, I would say definitely I read up on all of that like before I went for interviews, even for this current position, and that definitely gave me a little bit more leverage and confidence, and knowing who you're going to be working with and knowing what's expected of you, even informally, makes a really big difference and makes you less stressed out because you have an idea of what you're going to say.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. I think that finding the sort of, for me, it was the two sides of reading more about the job. And I think there's great advice about like looking up who's going to be interviewing you or like who you'll be working with. But I think also kind of practicing. I mean, it might sound weird to like, look in the mirror and like practice your 30-second, like, who am I speech. But I think every interview I've ever had has started with like, tell me about who you are. And so like, I think practicing a little bit about like, I'm a junior at the University of Oregon studying this, and this is what I'm interested in. Here's an experience I had on campus. Here's why, I'm really passionate about this job working on food security, because for me growing up, I, volunteered in my community. And so I really wanted to, take those connections from my community and make change on a larger scale. Like being willing to like practicing a little bit of that, like how to sell yourself. And, it changes a little bit with every internship or job or whatever you're interviewing for. But I think just being willing to kind of just like talk about who you are and be a little honest about like, here's why I'm applying, here's why I'm interested. I think that a lot of people, when they hear that question, give like a very, just like read their resume. And like, if the person's good at their interviewing you, they've already read your resume, they've already read your cover letter, they know that about you. And like, tell yourself a little bit about them. And even if it ends up it's like a 30-second, very quick thing, even just that little bit of personal, like, I'm not reading off something, I'm just like, hey, here's who I am, this is why I want this job. I think people really appreciate that.
Yeah, just kind of echo down Brendan's point. Just kind of be able to sell yourself. And for me, I was recommending to kind of tell your authentic story, tell them who you really are, what you really care about, and let the people know that you're not just a machine reading a piece of paper. You are just trying to, establish that virtual relationship there on your interview. And if the people like you, like Taylor said, they're not, trying to hire someone who work against them. They want to work together as allies. So you wanted to, build that virtual relationship. They can think about how comfortable they can work with you, and that smile more and just kind of feel the fear and do it anyway.
Oh, I was gonna say one little nugget of advice I got for interviews that I've literally used every time and I think has worked really well has been when they ask you if you have any questions. I used to always panic and be like, oh my goodness, what is a good question to ask them? And I was told to ask the question to your interviewer saying, say 3 months down the road, you've hired someone, what would make you feel good about your hire? And then in that moment, they get to really see that you are like thinking about the values and like skills you have that could like match what they want, and they're seeing that you care about their needs. And I think it's been really good, so thought I'd pass that along.
Yeah, I echo what everyone says. Elevator pitch is essential. Get your elevator pitch down. I had one. I rehearsed it every morning. I you just know it. It kind of sounds scripted at one point, but you just gotta like do it, or just do it with your roommate or your mom or your dog or whatever you want to do. House plant. But I also think one thing is having examples. Keep talking about examples. I think having an example, for those kind of seemingly like regular questions on interviews, like what's a time that you faced adversity, or what is a time that you dealt with conflict? Just having a fun, interesting, cool example that you like to talk about, just ready to go, just in case like you're like super nervous, you can just remind yourself with like a word or two of that example. So that's what I'd add on.
The last thing that I'll say then on to this question, another great pearl of advice that I got was that if you have an interview, they want to hire you, right? Like they do not want to keep bringing people in. They are looking through a stack of applications and have said, this person God help us, I hope they're as good in person as they are on paper, right? Like they really want to hire you. So that should give you a little bit of confidence going into the room. It's not there to be an inquisition. It's really there to make sure that you are as good of a person as you look like on paper. And that's where that colleague piece comes in and what everyone else is saying, right? Be a person, be a human, have regular thoughts and feelings, because they're already interested in you, right? They brought you in and they want to hire you. Well, here we are, 1 minute under time. So we might as well end there. Please join me in thanking all of our panelists today. This was really fantastic. I'll leave the chat open. If panelists are willing to share contact information, that would be fantastic. If not, that's fine and totally your prerogative. You can cut ties if you wish. And then other than that, have a fantastic evening, everyone, and stay safe out there.